What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Action RPG third-person tutorial series, we are going to be going over Hitscan or Look At to Interact Part 2. So initially in the series we had Overlap to Interact, then we created a system where we could look at something to bring up the interaction prompts. Then we had an episode on making the hit scan work with the overlap, and now we're going to make it so the hit scan can be used to actually interact with these objects. And all the overlap logic will still work, but we're just improving this system further so that we can use both hit scan and overlap at the same time. And the hit scan is going to do exactly what we want. So if we come into our game here, right now I have this green debug line that I'm using to represent my hit scan. So it goes and points to where my camera is pointing. So as I'm looking around, you can see it is moving. Now this has become quite messy, so I'm going to relaunch, but now that you know what that is, when we come into our game here, we will have our hit scan line. It's coming from the center of the camera. And now when we look at another object, say the chest plate, you'll see that the interact prompt comes up on the bottom of the screen. This is what we had accomplished in the previous episode at the Look At Interactions episode. However, we couldn't actually interact with it at all if we weren't overlapping with it, but now we will be able to. So if I press E, it is going to add that chest plate. Now, of course, you don't have to have your arms as long as I do. Right now, I have this huge distance where I can interact with it. It does not need to be that big. But if we go into our inventory, we see we have our chest plate and I can equip it. Everything worked as normal. We are also going to allow us to interact with NPCs using Hitscan. This isn't really going to be finished today because we don't have a prompt for interacting with NPCs. We were just determining if we were overlapping with them and then we could start dialogue, but the same rule applies here. So if I'm using Hitscan and I'm looking at the NPC and I press my interact button to start the interaction logic. Now I can't really leave this without adding some extra logic in here, but don't worry about that. We're going to do a lot more with NPC interactions in the future. I just want to make sure we can trigger them with Hitscan. So now that you've seen what we're going to be doing today, we're ready to hop into it. Before we do, if you want to get caught up in the entire series of the third-person action RPG tutorial, you can go ahead and click this link in the top right corner right here. This is the entire third-person action RPG playlist. So you can see how we've done everything from our markers, our attacks, our animations, all that good stuff. Alternatively, if you just care about the Look At to Interact system, I do recommend you watch the first episode of Look At to Interact if you haven't already, because if you watch that one, you'll be able to follow along a lot more closely in today's episode. I'll link that in the top right corner right here. With that out of the way, we're ready to get started. So, this is a code and blueprint tutorial series. We're going to be doing most in the code today. We will be editing the blueprint a little bit just to expand upon some logic, but the rest of it is going to be in some code. So we're going to go to Visual Studio and we want to go to our tick function. Let's start there. So for me, that's at the bottom of the file. And I want to go here because this is where we are dealing with our line trace and hit scan look at interaction types. So if we scroll down here, we have this section right here where we are calling get world, line trace single by channel, and passing in some variables. And just before that, we were setting end location with a comment, draw a line where the character is looking for interaction. So at this point, after we set end location, I am now drawing a debug line. This is the visual representation of where your interaction is. You don't have to do it this way. You don't even need to add this at all if you don't want to. The line trace does just this, but this debug line allows us to visualize it when we're testing things. So if you'd like, you can go ahead and copy this line here. So draw a debug line. It is an Unreal function. We need the world or the context, so just get world. We need the starting location, the ending location. Start location is the camera. We've already determined this earlier in the tick function. Get follow camera, get component location. And end location we're setting here, it's the follow camera forward vector times interact distance plus the start location. Then we had to pick a color, so I did F color : green. You could do whatever color you want. And this boolean that I'm setting here is for persistent lines. It means the line stays on the screen forever. You can set this to false as it gets annoying very quickly and they will fade away, but I wanted to show you exactly where I was looking while I was giving my demonstration. I set it to true. I'm going to set it to false now for next time so they don't stay on the screen like that, but this is what you can add if you want to test it. Now down below this where we're actually checking to see if we collide with an object, so if we go into this if statement, that means a blocking hit occurred. So the line trace hit something. If the line trace hits something, we need to determine what it is and then act appropriately. So previously in the series, we had an if statement and two else ifs. These handled our weapon, equipment, and item. Then we had an else, so if we had a blocking hit, but it wasn't any of our interactable types, then we were just setting interact actor to null pointer, basically saying we're not able to interact with anything, and then hiding the pop-up. I've added another else if today, and this is for the NPC. So else if auto interactable NPC equals cast to a base NPC. And what we're casting is hitResult.getActor. So just like with all the other ones, we're taking the result of the line trace, finding the actor that we hit. If it successfully casts to a base NPC, we know that we've collided with an NPC, which means we are looking at an NPC. At this point, we're ready to set interact actor equal to interactable NPC. We don't have to trigger any pop-up or anything here because we don't have one yet for NPCs. So this is all we're doing. But once we have this set up, we now have the appropriate actor to interact with. So we want to go to our interact function. So here's interact, and it's going to look mainly the same as we left it in the previous episodes. So if there's no menu open and the character is not dead, we were allowing interactions via overlap with NPCs, and we were doing that right here. So all this logic is the same as before. I didn't change it. However, this section that I just had highlighted, I wrapped in an if statement. So if not interact actor, or if exclamation mark interact actor. And this means if there is no interact actor. Interact actor right now is only being set when a hit scan occurs. So when our line trace and tick hits one of those blocking objects. So if there is no interact actor, then I'm allowing us to use the overlap behavior, but otherwise I want to prioritize interact actor over it. You'll notice the interact BP function call that we have here, which is a blueprint implementable event that does other overlap checks afterward for our weapons, equipment, and items, is something I'm still calling. This is something that will likely be translated to code, but hasn't been yet, and so I still want to call it. Now, additionally, you'll notice I'm calling it regardless if interact actor is valid or not. This is because I want to show you something that we can do with this function to give us a lot more freedom and also to test today's episode. So add this little if statement in here and take all of your NPC overlap logic and put it inside of it. Once you have that, we're ready to go into the blueprints, so we can go to Unreal. And we want to go to our base NPC. We need to edit their collision. So if we go to Blueprints, NPCs, NPC Paladin BP, this will work. We can do it in the code class for the base NPC as well. Doesn't matter where we do it, as long as we have a base class that's going to affect all the children. This isn't really a base blueprint class. This is a specific NPC. But we'll do it here for now until we do a refactor to allow a base, because this is the only NPC type that we have right now. You don't have to go into the full blueprint editor, but I'm going to. I'm going to go to the viewport. So this is my NPC. It is this character right here. And the capsule component on here is what determines collision with this NPC. So when we were overlapping with this character, that means we were touching up against this capsule component. That would allow us to interact with them. However, we also want to allow hit scans to work with our NPCs. So now if we scroll down in the details panel while the capsule component is selected, we can get to this collision section. And in here, it's going to be set to collision presets of pawn. When it's pawn, everything is blocked except visibility. However, in the code, when we set up our line trace, you'll see that we set the collision channel type to visibility. So of course, if we're checking for a blocking hit and the NPC collision ignores visibility, then that is not going to work. We can't land a hit scan with that. So we need to change the collision presets to custom. And everything can remain blocked, but visibility also needs to be blocked. This means you could also make it block all or block all dynamic, but I think custom is fine because I do like having the ability to change everything anyway. So once you do that, compile and save. Now lastly, we want to go into our base character blueprint where we are handling the interact BP event. So for me, that is third person CBP, blueprints, characters, base character BP. When we're in here, we have our event interact BP, and it was going into this logic where we're checking all overlapping actors of default item type and then casting to determine what type we were overlapping with. And you'll notice I don't need to include any sort of NPC logic in here, so I added this as an example. We handled this in code. I don't need to have this. So I'm going to remove that before I forget. We don't want to keep that in there. I've made a new function today called interact BP2. Now eventually we're only going to have one interaction function. But since I'm going to handle more of this interaction in the next episode, I wanted to just show you exactly what we were trying to achieve. So first of all, this is kind of messy. There's a lot going on here that can be simplified. It's a lot of the same nodes, and so we can make it simpler by making a function. So I made a new function, plus function, called interact BP2. And in here I just copied everything. Again, I'm going to remove my NPC logic here. So that does not need to be in there. That was just for a test. And I just copied everything that was in interact BP. However, interact BP2 takes in an input parameter. If you want to make this, you can press plus input parameter. I called it interact actor, and I just made it an actor object reference. Actor object reference. So we'll pass an actor into here, then we will cast the specific type that we're looking for, and from there we will do our interaction logic. The reason this is important is because then if we were to do this logic immediately in the interact BP event and we pass the interact actor, our line tracing will automatically work. We can hit scan and interact. Right now this forces us to use overlapping actors. We're not even using interact actor in the blueprint here. So while I'm not specifically going to do this in today's episode, it's going to be the next interaction episode, I wanted to show you what we were getting around and what we were improving. So we're getting around this limitation of requiring overlapping actors. So to test it, to make sure you're in a good spot for the next episode, what we need to do is now call our interact BP2. So you can drag it in here. For the interact actor, we can use interact actor that was in the third person tutorial character. Simply drag off of interact BP and connect it to interact BP2, and that's it. You'll notice that it's not connected to any logic on the right here. However, if I am to come into the game, I can now look at an object, say the chest plate, and interact with it. And there we go. Now my interaction via overlap will not work. So if I'm not looking at it, I can't pick anything up that I'm overlapping with. So that's why I'm not handling this just like this. We need to account for overlap too. But I want to convert this to code and clean it up. That conversion to code and cleanup is going to be one episode. It's going to be the next interaction episode. But I wanted to make sure that we had a good idea of what we were handling in today's episode, along with the other setup and adjustments that we made, so that we can just focus on converting and cleaning up in the next episode without explaining all this other stuff too. I hope this video helped you improve your Hitscan interactions in your game, and if it did, please subscribe. It does more for the channel than anything else you can do, and it's completely free. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership, Discord supporters, and Patreon members. You guys are incredible. Thank you so much to everyone who has. If you ran into any problems following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I would be happy to help you, and the support is completely free. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.